Hear our voices. Me Too started with empowerment through empathy. How does the problem of rape, sexual violence occur in our communities? Well, a little background. ABC and Washington Post in 2017 quote, 54% of American women report receiving unwarranted and inappropriate sexual advances, with 95% of them saying that such behavior usually goes unpunished. Why? Did you hear our voices? I'm going to talk about silencing the victims. Most of us know that 156 victims gave statements in a court in Lansington, Michigan this week to a judge. They were sexual assault victims. Time, January 25, 2018. Rachel Denhollander, the first victim to accuse Dr. Larry Nassar, delivers an emotional plea. There's a YouTube video out there. Here's one of the first scenarios about silencing the victim. Rachel Denhollander filed a complaint and a police report against Dr. Larry Nassar August 29, 2016, and also a public story to the Indianapolis Star about what he had done. So what happened to Rachel after August 29, 2016? Well, she penned an article in the New York Times that was published January 26, 2018. What happened to this victim? She lost her closest friends, she lost her privacy, she lost her church. That's how her community reacted to the complaint. Did they hear her voice? Scenario 2, New York Times article 1 of 2018, and then CNN published a video, a YouTube video. A mega church in Memphis, Tennessee congregants broke into a 25-second of applause after Pastor Andy Savage confessed to a 1998 sexual incident with a teenager. Andy Savage even got people on their feet applauding after his confession. That's a community and how they reacted to the offender. What prompted the confession? On January 5th, 2018, Jules Woodson identified herself in a blog and addressed an email to Pastor Andy Savage. The blog is out there on Abuse Survivors blog. Her blog, Silent No More, a survivor of sexual assault by prominent Memphis pastor Andy Savage, and shares her story. She puts out there all kinds of information. It's a rather long blog, but she also quotes hashtag #MeToo, hashtag #ChurchToo. What else happened? Okay, so he confessed January, I think it was January, well, the video was January 11th. So on January 16th, what happened to Jules Woodson? She filed a police report with Montgomery County, Texas Sheriff Department. She filed a report with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. How did the community react to her? Well, the sheriff said the statute of limitations had passed. Jules finds out that Andy Savage has a live streaming video, and she found it disgusting. So who heard Jules' voice? And when she was assaulted as a teenager, she did complain. What about the church? What about the police? Who heard Jewel Woodson's voice? Scenario 3, Salon, December 10th, 2017. What about non-disclosure agreements silencing victims? Now this got very lengthy and technical and legalistic, so I'm only picking out a few quotes from this, but I want to bring the subject up. It's common practice, it's non-disparagement or confidentiality agreements. It's common practice for many companies to require their employees to sign non-disclosure agreements known as NDAs when they start working at a company under the guise of protecting the company's secrets. Paragraph down. Though they might seem benign, NDAs and confidentiality clauses can keep victims under abusers' control. Harvey Weinstein is an example of NDAs, and in another article in Salon, confidentiality clauses shouldn't muzzle sexual abuse victims. Rose McGowan recently was offered $1 million to agree to keep her settlement with Weinstein secret, but she declined. What about this community? How are they silencing the victims? Well, a solution, Mira Sorvino's article said that there is a powerful women's group that are working on an initiative that includes taking another look at how these agreements only implore more silence. Non-disclosure agreements, hear our voices. Fourth scenario, rape kits. January 26, 2018. It's an Attorney General's Association. I saw this ad. Meet Josh Cow. He's running for the Attorney General up in Wisconsin to bring justice to survivors of sexual assault and to clear the state's backlog of 6,000 untested rape kits. There's a video of this out there. Wisconsin, okay, so let's go back. In November 3rd of 2017 in US Today, they reported Wisconsin received $2 million from the federal government to process the backlog, the sexual rape kits. What did they find out? Officials declined to provide average amount of time. The victims are denied information, no access to where's my rape kit, what's going on. How is our community acting to rape kits? Silencing the victims, hear our voices. Here's my summary. How does the problem of repeated sexual assault occur in our community? My original statement. What about this community? What about any community? I read over 100 personal sexual assault stories, and what I want to share is this breakdown of this community. Breakdown being 44% of these people, these victims were assaulted by their family, 18% at work, and 38% at a school, a church, boyfriends, dates. So, sexual assault victims' fear of jeopardizing their personal lives, their religious lives, their financial means, their friends, and their status was a real fear. Solutions: silence no more. There is a place where petitions, you can get petitions. Petitions are really helping now with these young athletes. It's at www.change.org. Jules Woodson went and put her information out there on Abuse Survivors blog. How about challenging anybody that can review NDAs or non-disclosure agreements, especially related to the workplace? How can we help these people? What about the rape kits? I'm going to close with a really, really good statement. This is for all communities involved with this. Inaction is an action. Justice requires action and a voice. Silence is indifference. Judge Rosemary Aquilina, she said this January 24th, 2018. Hear our voices.
Resilience. When I listened to the stories of the brave women shared about the crimes of the U.S. gymnastics doctor, I was struck by their courage and resilience. I was inspired to think back to the vulnerability and confusion that I felt when my 8th grade science teacher, quote, taught me a lesson, end quote, about not sitting on the edge of my chair by sitting behind me in my chair. To be clear, he would put his 50-something body up against my 13-year-old back in between the chair and my body. This was his joke, his way to disempower and embarrass girls in the classroom for sitting on the edge of our chairs. Why? I still wonder today, to limit our sense of strength, knowledge, and capability in his science class? Because he could? Would he have done that to the boys? I don't remember him doing it to them. And when I told my mom about it, she was horrified and told the other moms of the other girls in my class. They agreed it was weird and inappropriate and that it had happened to several of their daughters when they were in the class. This was in 1985 and 1986. Looking back, we have to consider, how far have we come? When I was growing up in the 80s, the most popular movies of the time were Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Animal House. Commonly, kids then would listen to the soundtracks from the movie, as did I. Listening to the lyrics today, I hear stories of sexual conquest. So many messages were centered on teenage boys gaining points for losing their virginity or scoring bitchin' babes. Grotesque displays of hypermasculinity, so obviously overcompensating for feelings of insecurity, unjust and hurtful, monopolizing the themes of our youth. What were the perspectives of the women who were the subjects of those conquests? Their experiences were muted by drunkenness or solemnly acknowledging that they had no right to voice their experience. Weird science, indeed. So the Me Too movement has come alive at a time when the most disgusting teenage playboy has gained the ultimate seat of power. These women who have testified about their experiences have done so in an era when women are bravely standing up, unwilling to defend these misogynistic constructs any longer. Increasingly, we are sick of it, growing intolerant of hypocrisy. And yet, when even Michelle Obama's October 2016 speech after the Access Hollywood tapes told of our story of disgust and outrage, it stirred our souls. But while it was heartfelt and inspiring, it still did not turn the tide or help the outcome. Those 53% of white college-educated women, they grew up watching, consuming those same films in pop culture. And did they think that a successful billionaire had earned the right to accost them or other women? Did they feel in their hearts that those women deserved it? At risk of being accused of blaming the victims, I fear that we women have sometimes been complicit in these crimes when we silently condone these acts. Now we are finally owning our voices and our right to proclaim our experiences. Trigger warning. I recently watched the TV series The Handmaid's Tale. By show of hands, who's seen that or read the book by Margaret Atwood? So about half of you. This novel was published in 1986. Watching this has put a lot into perspective. The story depicts a woman of childbearing age as she is put into sexual slavery to benefit the privileged class in a theocratic dystopian society under martial law. Families are torn apart and, quote, gender traitors are sent to quickly die as slaves subjected to toxic poisoning. Hangings of political activists and people who oppose the rule of law are common occurrence in these series. Viewing this series is akin to visiting the Holocaust Museum. Necessary to become fully human and yet painful to experience, to realize what humanity is capable of committing. Hyperbole? Metaphor? I'd love to discuss this book in a class or book study to really engage in a frank review of how it relates to our modern society or not. When The Handmaid's Tale was published, I was in high school, and I remember one of my best friends talking about this book. It didn't capture my attention at the time. Jeannie and I have 3 daughters and 1 son. We feel so desperately intent on protecting them from perpetrators, not just the serial sexual offenders that make the news, but also those of us, through our own unwitting acquiescence, conform to societal norms. How do we teach our children to own their voices, to say what is right and what is wrong, aligned with how their body feels? Our young women with voices and choices, resilience. Young women who spoke out against this doctor, they stir my soul. They inspire me to fight for them and all of our daughters, sisters, and mothers, but also for our sons. Due process is an essential element needed for societal shift, a shift that's needed for truth and reconciliation. We are survivors and we will thrive, growing more capable and stronger every day. We stand with our feet apart, planted firmly beneath us. Yes, we have agency in our community. In the past, we've been too concerned about being polite or upsetting someone's feelings or ruining their careers, but not owning our voice. We should be asking what policies exist to protect our youth from predators. When a student complains about perceived mistreatment, how is that handled? When has a light been shined on that process in our community? And when this occurs with all parties, will all have a chance to have their voices heard? With our feet firmly planted beneath us, owning the audacity of our voices, voices which give us power as human beings, and still we rise, and nevertheless we persist. Listen, I love the men in my life, and yet I feel we are way too protective of their feelings. It's time that we speak out and claim our experience. #MeToo.
I want to thank Pastor Brown for the invitation to speak this morning on this subject and for the confidence in allowing me to address his congregation. Over the last couple of years, I've come to know many of you very well and consider you friends and sister in the fight for equality. I remember the first "Where do we go from here" meeting. That's what I call it, the meetings you guys had here right after the devastating election of November 26. The date of November 8th, 2016 will be forever etched in my brain, the same way for most of you my age, we'll always remember where we were November 22nd, 1963, and April 4th, 1968. Election night, I was traveling by train with my daughter to go bury my second younger sister in a 2-year span. The internet connection on the train wasn't great, so it was around 3 a.m. that it was confirmed for me that Hillary had lost. Man, I was messed up. I was already in a state of mourning, but to hear that it really messed me up. And I believe something had died in our country that night. And many of us, especially women, were in mourning. Also, like many of you, I was searching social media, trying to make connections with like-minded people to figure out, where do we go from here? Then the Women's March of January 2017 happened, and a silent lioness was awakened. Man, I was proud of us. The 2016 election is a glaring example of the misogyny in this country. Our society was willing to elect a serial sexual abuser rather than elect a female president. Donald Trump had over 15 women come forward accusing him of sexual assault. We watched the video of him bragging about being able to assault women at will because of who he was. And since becoming president, Donald Trump has refused to address equal pay for women. He has reversed his predecessor's policies on allowing the ACA to cover contraception for women. And in September, he rescinded Barack Obama's policy on investigating and prosecuting sexual assault at schools and universities. According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, 75% of all rape victims are assaulted by someone they know. 1 in 10 women are raped every year on college campuses. 30% of Native American women are raped in their lifetime. For African American women, it's 18.8%, and for white women, it's 17.9%. Watching #MeToo go viral on social media after actress Alyssa Milano started it in response to the revelations of Hollywood's icon Harvey Weinstein's decades of sexually assaulted women gave me pause. I hesitated to make the post on my Facebook when challenged by a Facebook friend. I initially hesitated because I'd never actually been raped, but had been sexually assaulted and harassed like I dare to say every other female. But after making this post, I began to think about my hesitation. I realized even though I knew my experience, I didn't want others to draw a conclusion of what my #MeToo meant. So I began to further examine how I was really feeling. Women have been taught to internalize sexual assault and abuse. Whether explicit or implicit, we have been taught sexual assault was something to be ashamed of, that it was our shame. And to talk about it devalued us as women. As an African American woman who has been told more than a few times that I was using the race card, talking about sexual harassment had that same kind of feeling for me. I believe the reason most black people don't challenge discrimination is the same reason women suffer sexual assault in silence. Racism and misogyny both has its roots in abuse of power. The United States of America has also always been a patriarchal society, and sexual abuse is often done in isolation and often by men with positions of power. These men often have consistently gotten away with their abuse. And like the two previous speakers, those young innocent girls that Larry Nassar, who had been given total control over them by their parents who trusted him, and the suffering they did at the hands of that monster, 150 young girls, some as young as 6 years old. Oh, it made my blood boil. But even more than that, it makes me very sad that this was the culture that existed and still exists in this country. The #MeToo campaign was started by a black woman by the name of Tarana Burke over 10 years ago. Tarana founded this movement after working as a youth camp counselor in Alabama. She tells the story of a 13-year-old girl who came up to her and started sharing the sexual abuse that she was suffering at the hands of her stepfather. After about listening for 5 minutes, Tarana shut the girl down because her story reminded her too much of Tarana's own sexual abuse. And Burke stated, as the young girl walked away, she couldn't stop thinking, why couldn't I have just said, me too? Her goal for the Me Too movement campaign is to give women a voice, to give us strength, and to give us power. Soon I'm going to be a great-grandmother. I'm so excited. My grandson and his wife are due in June. And so it's my life mission now to fight this ugly monster of racism and sexism and all the other isms that exist in this country. And I believe that we the people, none of us can stop until every institution in this country looks like we the people, and none of us can stop. And the most powerful weapon that we have is our vote. So my message today is that we must vote, because we're here at a time that it's a moral imperative that we vote and that we speak up and that we get more women elected. 50-some% of this country is women, and black women, and Hispanic women, and Native American women. We have to take a stand. And once again, I just want to say that I write a column that the struggle continues, but the resistance is real. Thank you.
Our speakers this morning have been eloquent, and I want to express my appreciation for you sharing with us. I have just a couple of thoughts to add. I can feel the energy of the rally in East Peoria last week, and I can still feel the energy of a year before, the sense of optimism, a feeling of community, and the ambiance of unstoppability. In my perception, there is a wave of energy and determination growing in our country. It is building. It has not peaked yet. It is not at its peak. It's still in the growing phase of the wave. Emerging since, I think, perhaps the day after Inauguration Day in 2017. It is not the mean-spirited patriarchal regime currently in power, but rather this wave of change, led by women, that will bring in the Renaissance that we're longing for and lead our country to what could actually be called true greatness. As I was thinking about this service the other day, I nervously checked one of my favorite websites, which is what I think I do when I need an answer of some sort, and 4 out of the first 6 articles were about sexual harassment. Many men are being outed, their tragic stories, there are serious consequences. And I want to echo what Katie said about due process as being important always. But I hope that in the midst of all this time of outrage, we remember something that Tamron Hall said at the Martin Luther King luncheon 2 weeks ago when she reminded us, and I will not use her exact words but paraphrase. She reminded us that not all men do what the president boasts that he does. There are many of us in the world who want to be allies and want to be equal partners. That's what we want. But even those of us who want to be allies, we need to unlearn the assumptions of patriarchy. Just like we all need to unlearn the assumptions of white supremacy. We are all caught in these webs of history and tradition, and much of it is unconscious. We don't even know we're doing things. We're all in a learning process. As part of our church's learning process, as we celebrate our 105th anniversary year with great joy, I need to repeat something that I have said before, and that is that in this span of 175 years, there has been sexual misconduct by clergy in this church. I'm just telling you that that's part of our history. Indeed, during some periods of our history, some behaviors were considered normal that we would now call misconduct. And this has to do with the evolving path of our society. I don't say this in order to make you overly suspicious, but I hope it will encourage us to be watchful and aware and to consciously develop policies and ways of being together that will, as much as possible, ensure that these events would not happen anytime in the future. If you have concerns about this, please come and talk to me, or come and talk to Reverend Linda White, who, by the way, is preaching in Evanston, Illinois this morning. But it's wonderful to have different choices about who you can talk to, and it's one other good reason for having more than one minister in a church. But I assure you, we'll take your concerns seriously if you come and see us. We need to be very intentional about having safe space in this church. And we do have policies and practices in place at the moment. I want to make it clear today that our Unitarian Universalist traditions stand clearly on the side of full equality of women. That is our tradition, and there is no ambiguity about that. Whether or not we've always been perfect about enacting that is another matter, but it is our tradition. And on a personal level, I want to affirm that I want to be an ally, and I believe that the overwhelming majority of men in our church also want to be allies. We want to love and support the strong women leaders who are key players in this transformation of society that is taking place right now. You can feel that wave coming on. And I'm so grateful to all who are sharing in this leadership, but boy, I'll tell you, one of the places we feel it is on those women marches. You can feel that is happening, and it is a good feeling. It is these emerging fusion coalitions where women, black, brown, white people, gay, straight, bi, trans, the interfaith and immigrant communities, and yes, good-hearted men will come together. And we will transform our society, which is currently mired in a patriarchal, dictatorial, racist rut. We will be transformed into a land of true justice. Those we have heard today, along with countless others, will be at the center of that transformation. Thank goodness this is what democracy looks like.